Forms of beauty exist that we are only dimly aware of. So much happens that we fail to notice. We never experience some of the most beautiful phenomena in nature. Have you ever been in the Pacific Ocean and seen the sun rise over the continent? The light creates a beautiful golden path over the water that seems to come right to you. Under certain circumstances, when you're far out beyond the impact zone, air gets trapped in large exploding waves. It creates a brilliant, short-lived shower and a magnificent rainbow. When you really know the water, the texture of the ocean, the surface, reveals currents and eddies that can help you to find safety. And on a few days in your lifetime, the gray of the sky will perfectly match the gray of the water, and the rain will fall in such a way that it seems like 1,000,000 drops of water are frozen mid-air just above the surface. Surfing on certain fall days at Ocean Beach, when the wind blows offshore, the wave doubles up and it pitches over you so that you're in a beautiful green room. And suddenly behind you, this wave collapsing sprays spray out and shoots you out back into the normal world. I wish so dearly that I could communicate what it feels like to be riding a wave and to look below the surface and see a dolphin riding that wave with you. Now, because of their grief, the disciples fail to see the most beautiful thing of all. They fail to see God in the presence of their friend, Jesus. And today, I especially understand this feeling. Mike Lawler was one of my dearest friends, and he was the one who helped me to see all the things I just described to you. He was the generous soul who taught me how to surf. And 2 days ago, I learned that he had only recently died. And in the last 72 hours, I've just found myself unexplainably, emotionally overwhelmed. Mike was 6'5". He weighed 220 pounds. He was a contrarian bull of a man, and the world was his china shop. He dropped out of college from UCLA to pioneer big wave surfing on the North Shore of Oahu, and he was not at all shy about confronting people who he thought who were overeducated and full of hot air. And believe it or not, sometimes I fell into that category myself. He was a literary roofing contractor. He wrote me a letter once that said, "I used to write sermons when I was shingling roofs, alone with my thoughts and the rhythm of a hatchet whacking nails into cedar shakes." The two of us spent hundreds of hours driving together to the beach in his pickup truck. It smelled strongly of wetsuit neoprene, surf wax, and cigar smoke that he later told me that he used to make the cab not smell so much like marijuana. We talked about creativity, painting, science. We talked about Martin Heidegger, the philosopher, Werner Erhard, and what the 60s were like. And he taught me about culture, art, physics, meteorology, history, ethics, sociology, and techniques of surfing. And he introduced me to the pleasure of old-fashioned donuts, the glazed kind. And that is what I crave after every surf session, even to this day. Every All Souls Requiem at Grace Cathedral feels so different because nothing is more particular, more specific than the loss of someone we love. And each year, that loss feels different. So today we carry a kind of joy of just being together after the pandemic, but also the weight of so many funerals that we've been hosting this fall to honor the many people we lost over the last 3 years. We have so many losses as a community that I hesitate to even name anyone. But who can imagine life here after Dare's death last week? On Wednesday, Christopher Keedy, our music director, and I talked about the music of Mozart's Requiem, the way it feels, not just the way it sounds. Mozart composed this as he himself was dying, and the music conveys a sense of frustration and anger at our limits as human beings. It expresses anxiety about whether we will be forgiven for the damage that we have done. Mozart is not afraid to encourage us to face our sadness. And with the tension and the disappointment, we also encounter what is beautiful, what we have not noticed yet. The theologian David Bentley Hart writes that what is most mysterious and exalted is also that which, strangely enough, turns out to be most ordinary and nearest to hand. And that which is most glorious in its transcendence is also that which is humblest in its wonderful immediacy. We know far more than we are usually aware of knowing. The modern 20th century French composer Olivier Messiaen spent 9 months in a World War II German prisoner of war camp. He was composing Quartet for the End of Time. It uses the 4 musical instruments that could be found available in the camp: piano, cello, violin, and clarinet. He saw such suffering and had every reason to surrender to cynicism. But instead, he was fond of paraphrasing Thomas Aquinas, reminding us that God dazzles us by an excess of truth. Messiaen writes, "Certain people are annoyed that I believe in God, but I want people to know that God is present in everything, in the concert hall, in the ocean, on a mountain, even on the underground." The ancient theologian St. Gregory of Nyssa believed that death and evil ultimately cannot hinder us in moving toward God. Hart summarizes his theology writing, "Creation is a partaking in the inexhaustible goodness of God and its ceaseless flow of light and shadow, constancy and change, while the restless soul, immersed in the spectacle of God's glory, is drawn without break beyond the world to the source of its beauty, to embrace the infinite." My tough, impermeable, sometimes obnoxious surfing friend, Mike Lawler, believed this. He was so proud of being a lifelong Episcopalian. The disciples walked many miles without recognizing Jesus, and I did the same when I walked with Mike. A few years ago, he wrote a December letter to me from his home in Hawaii, and it was about his own death. He said that death used to seem so far off to be no bother, and then he found himself thinking more about it. And he quoted Joan Didion, who he described as an Episcopalian. That's kind of a loose translation of Joan Didion's. I guess all of us are kind of Episcopalian in that way. But he quoted her book, The Year of Magical Thinking, and this is what she wrote. "We are not idealized wild beings. We are imperfect, mortal beings, aware of that mortality even as we push it away, failed by our very complication, so wired that when we mourn our losses, we are mourning for better or worse ourselves. As we were, we are no longer. As we will one day be not at all. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. Mike closes his letter with these words: "My life has been partly molded by having lost a little sister when I was about 13. You are afraid to love because those you love will die. And I wish there was a way to get over this fear. But this is not the conversation for Advent." The ocean was calm and glassy tonight as the spangled sun made you look and love the world. Your sermon touched me as no other. Love, Mike. Forms of beauty exist that we are only dimly aware of. We are drawn beyond the world to the source of its beauty.